Hello and welcome to Beach House 34's trial coverage of the Avery trial. We are on episode 40, and if you listened to the last episode was entirely about one juror. We learned that one of the jurors had served on a civil case years ago where Detective Remacher, one of the state's key witnesses, was actually the plaintiff, and she remembered awarding him damages but didn't even recall if he testified. Still, the defense argued that just being in that position creates bias because how can you fairly judge someone again when you've already sided with them once? The state didn't see a problem, and the judge agreed and decided to keep her on the jury. So in this episode, we actually move on. It's the same day. Everybody's kind of taking a break, and we're going to be hearing from investigator Gary Steier. He's a special investigator with Calumet County Sheriff's Department. He was involved in searches of Avery's yard, including Steven Avery's trailer on November 5th through the 12th, and also on March 1st and 2nd. So with the juror stuff now behind us, court is back in session. So at this point, the judge or the court has made his ruling that they are going to keep this juror on the jury. And then says, counsel, is there anything else to take up before we bring in the jury and resume with the next witness? And Attorney Kratz, again, prosecution, says just one matter, Judge. The next witness, like some law enforcement officers that come before the court, is a member of a Metro drug unit as part of his responsibilities and is actively involved in undercover narcotics investigations. He has asked this court, although we believe that his audio poses no threat to either himself or his investigations, that the court direct that video of this officer not be taken. He is a relatively short officer. I have spoken to Mr. Buting about that, and obviously audio of this officer will be permitted, but pursuant to statute, Judge. I believe the court has the authority, and I would ask for this officer, and I think in the case, this officer alone, that videotape not be taken of his testimony. The court then says, Mr. Buting, and Attorney Buting says, I have no problem with that. That's fine. And the court says, I assume that it's sufficient if I simply direct the cameraman to just focus on the attorneys or the board or something else, that they just be instructed not to show the camera on the witness. Attorney Kratz says, anything else, Judge, that would be just fine. And the court says, all right. I think that should be sufficient to most narrowly meet the state's request while still allowing for the public coverage of this trial. So, Mr. Cameraman, I assume you can follow that directive. And although I can't make eye contact with who is ever behind the glass, I will ask the same of the cameraman in the media room. Is that you? And a reporter says, no, I'm a reporter, but I'm standing up and I would like to make a record to the court. Our attorney from WISN TV, Attorney Flynn, has left a message in the back for the court. He would like to be heard on this issue. On this issue here? Yes, involving the DCI agent. Oh, okay. Well, we'll take a short break and I will take the phone call in chambers and see if anything further is necessary. The reporter then says thank you. And at this point, the recess is taken. Jury is still not present. And the court then says, at this time, I will indicate for the record, and we're outside the presence of the jury, I spoke to Attorney Matthew Flynn, who represents WISN in Milwaukee. I believe his call was prompted in anticipation of the court completely prohibiting coverage of the trial during the testimony of the next witness. When I explained to him that I felt the needs of the media and the needs of the court could be accommodated by allowing the proceedings to continue to be televised during the testimony of the next witness, but simply instructing the cameraman not to show his face, Mr. Flynn indicated that was satisfactory to he and his client. So that's what the court will do. I have received a nod from the cameraman that he understands the instructions. And with that, we'll bring in the jury at this time and then allow the state to call its next witness. And Attorney Kratz says, that's fine. Thank you, Judge. And at this point, the jury is brought in. And the court then addresses the jury and says, you may be seated. Members of the jury, before we begin, I just want you to rest assured that the attorneys and I did not take a 3-hour lunch today. We had a number of matters to address that had to be addressed outside the presence of the jury. I believe we are ready to go now, and at this time, we're going to have the state call its next witness. Attorney Kratz says, thank you, Judge. The state will call Gary Steier to the stand. I have 2 exhibits, Janet. And then the clerk asks him to raise his right hand. He is then sworn in, and the direct examination begins. Mr. Steier, how are you employed? I'm a special investigator with the Calumet County Sheriff's Department. Do you also have special responsibilities with a multi-jurisdictional organization? Yes, I do. Could you describe that just briefly, please? I'm assigned to the 4-county drug unit, Lake Winnebago Drug Unit. With Calumet County, what are your responsibilities? A special investigator position is 50% investigations, 50% Lake Winnebago area Metropolitan Enforcement Drug Group Unit. Oof, that's a long. Imagine that on a business card. Investigations into the 4 counties around Lake Winnebago as far as drug investigations, and then 50% other investigations pertaining into Calumet County. Mr. Steier, in your general investigative responsibilities, were you asked on November 5th of 2005 to proceed to the Avery salvage yard? Yes, I was. And that first evening, that is on the 5th of November, did you actively participate in the first search, what we have come to know as a sweep of several residences on the property? Yes. Can you describe that just briefly for us, please? Myself and Detective Remaker were assigned to execute the search warrant on Steven Avery's property, specifically looking for Teresa Halbach. I believe we were the 2 investigators that entered the residence and did an initial sweep looking for Teresa Halbach. As I understand, Investigator Steier, that through the rest of that week, that is between the 5th and the 12th of November, you were actively involved in other search as well as investigative efforts in this case? Yes. In fact, Investigator Steier, after the completion of that first week's worth of investigation, you continued to be asked to perform investigative functions in this case. Is that true? Yes. I will now direct your attention to March 1st and 2nd of 2006. Ask if you were once again asked to participate or cooperate in investigative efforts. Yes. Could you tell the jury on March 1st and 2nd what you were asked to do? On March 1st and 2nd, I was asked to be the evidence custodian for the search warrant when it was executed, more particularly to the garage of the residence of Steven Avery. Directing your attention first to March 1st, what were your responsibilities in searching Steven Avery's garage? My responsibilities were to collect or make sure that the evidence collected in the garage was packaged, had an officer who discovered who had collected the items and had dated that, a date and time that that item was collected, and that all the evidence was taken out of the garage and made sure that the chain of custody was intact. Do you know an agent with the Division of Criminal Investigation named Kevin Heimerl? Yes. Was he also involved in both search and collection efforts on March 1st and 2nd? Yes, he was. On March 1st, Investigator Steier, upon a search of the garage of Steven Avery, was any particular item of interest located? There were several items that were collected that were of interest. 2 of the items were bullet fragments collected inside the garage. These are the bullet fragments that I'm going to ask you, at least for the next several questions. Direct your attention on March 1st, that is the first day of a 2-day search project or procedure. Could you tell us how that fragment was located and what you personally did after that fragment was located? Day 1 of the search warrant, a bullet fragment was located. The item was located by Agent Heimerl and was collected by myself. Day 2 of the search warrant, a second bullet fragment was also located by Agent Heimerl and was collected by Detective Remaker. Attorney Buting then says, Judge, just so the record is clear as to the actions of Agent Heimerl, he's going to be testifying. It would be hearsay. That's why I'm not objecting, because he is coming. And the court says, all right, thank you. Attorney Kratz then continues. He will be our next witness, and thank you, counsel. And then he continues his questioning. I'm showing you what has been marked for identification as exhibit number 276 and 277. Are you able to identify or recognize those exhibits? Yes, the exhibit with the plastic bag with initials GS was collected by myself. That's 276. That's correct. And was that found on the first day or the second day? It was found on March 1st. Okay. Do you remember generally within the garage where that bullet fragment was located? Would be in the northwest corner of the garage. I'm going to show you, investigator, what has been previously received as exhibit number 108. Ask if this computer diagram assists you in describing to the jury where this bullet fragment was found. The evidence photograph marker number 9. As far as the collection, packaging, and then taking control of that first bullet fragment, could you explain once again for the jury who it was that found the fragment, which I'm sure we'll hear about, but then who both packaged and took control of? The bullet fragment, Exhibit 276, in the paper bag was located by Agent Heimerl and collected by myself. All the photographs inside the trailer were done by Agent Heimerl. You mean inside the garage? I'm sorry, inside the garage, yes. Just so the jury knows, there was another search going on inside of Mr. Avery's trailer at the same time. Is that right? That's correct. We were divided into teams, a team of 5. We were assigned the garage and another team was assigned inside the trailer at the same time. Okay. Now, the next day, that is on March 2nd, directing your attention to exhibit number 277, where was that found? That would have been located on the evidence photograph tent marker 23A. After its detection, again, which we're going to hear about in just a couple minutes, what happened with that bullet fragment? The bullet was turned over to me from Detective Remaker. After taking custody, I understand on 2 separate days, but on each of these items of evidence, could you describe for the jury what was done with them? What happened after you retained possession of them? The items were packaged or were collected in a package and turned over to me, and then evidence tape surrounding the package was placed on the item collected. And then from there, the items were transported to a trailer, which was housing the other items that were collected from the same. Attorney Kratz says, I think it's 125, Mr. Fallon. And then he continues. Finally, Investigator Steier, were you familiar with a log that is a check-in and check-out procedure or document that was being utilized on those days? I was aware that there was a log being taken of our entry and exit times in and out of the garage and the surrounding area. Now, the garage and the surrounding area, are those the same logs or the same kind of place? Day 1, the log reflected inside the garage. Day 2 reflected the garage and the evidence tape, which was just outside the garage. All right. Either on March 1st or March 2nd, had you witnessed either Lieutenant James Lenk or Sergeant Andrew Colburn come inside of the garage itself? No. If either Lieutenant Lenk or Sergeant Colburn had come inside the garage, is that something that you would have noticed? Probably. It was only 5 or 6 of us inside the garage at that time. All right. And Mr. Fallon, as soon as he finds it, is going to show you the actual log. Attorney Kratz says, is it 125, counsel? Is that the right log? Attorney Fallon says there's 3 possibilities, counsel, 125, 147, and 146. Attorney Kratz says perhaps Mr. Buting can, and then Attorney Kratz continues his questioning. We're going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 146 and 147. First of all, I will ask if you recognize those documents. I have not seen these particular documents. No. Well, then, what I'm going to do is go by your independent recollection. Do you know if Lieutenant Lenk had, on either day, come inside of the outer perimeter, that is the outer check-in area? To answer your question, the day 1, no, Lieutenant Lenk did not enter the garage area. I believe these records are for the trailer, not for the garage. All right. But what I'm asking, though, is do you know if, on either day, Lieutenant Lenk entered what would be the outer perimeter, not the garage itself, but was he in the general vicinity of those search efforts? Yes, on day 2, he was near the tape line of the evidence, but not inside the garage. All right. And I guess that's the point that I'm asking you. Although inside of where the general public couldn't get, he wasn't in the garage itself. Is that your testimony? Yes. At any time, Investigator Steier, did you see Lieutenant Lenk provide any other officer who may have come into the garage with any kind of evidence or anything to secrete or to plant or to hide in there? No. My last question is, if that would have happened, is that something that you would have seen? I probably would have noticed something unusual, but to answer the question, I don't know if I would have actually been able to determine that. We now have found Exhibit 125, which, in fact, is that outer perimeter log. Is that something that you do recognize? Yes. And you notice Lieutenant Link's name on that outer perimeter log. Is that correct? It's on page 1. Yes. All right. For March 2nd. Attorney Kratz then says, and recognizing, Judge, that we are going to hear about the discovery and photography of exhibits number 276 and 77, I still will, at this time, move their admission. The court says, any objection? Attorney Buting says, no. Court says, all right, those exhibits are admitted. Attorney Kratz then says, that's all I have of this witness. Thank you, Judge. The court says, all right, you are excused, sir. Attorney Buting says, no. The court says, oh, sorry, jumping the gun. Attorney Buting says, not so fast. The court says, okay. And then Attorney Buting says, okay, and begins his cross-examination. I'm sorry, is it detective or investigator? Investigator. Okay. Investigator Steier, your involvement, you had some involvement in this case back in November of '05? Yes. During that week when it first started, right? Yes. And you work for Calumet Sheriff's Department, right? Yes. And I'm sure that you were aware that on the very, very first day, November 5th of 2005, the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department had decided to turn over this investigation to Calumet, right? That's correct. Because of this possible conflict of interest over the fact that Mr. Avery here was suing Manitowoc County, right? That's correct. And then after the property was held for that week, November 5th to the 12th, Manitowoc didn't really have much else to do in this case investigation, to your knowledge, did they initially? After that, no, not that I believe so. So it was primarily Calumet, represented by Mr. Wiegert, who's not here at the moment, and DCI, led by Mr. Fassbender, who were running the investigation of the case, as far as you knew? Yes. Okay. So 4 months go by, and now we're up to March 1st, 4 months when Manitowoc County had really had nothing to do with this case. Would that be fair? Yes. Suddenly, there's another search warrant at Mr. Avery's trailer and garage, and we see Manitowoc back in the case. Isn't that right? As far as I know, yes. You have all the logs up there with you, or just one? I just have the second, I believe. Attorney Buting says, okay, let me have that one, please. And then he continues. Now, the first day, this was actually sort of a 2-day search of those properties, right? First and second? Yes, that's correct. And somebody with your department maintained overall security of that scene during that time? Yes. 24 hours? Mm-hmm. Sorry, we're talking over each other here. And those people who maintained security of the scene, do you know whether they were Manitowoc or Calumet? They were Calumet, all right? And they were maintaining a log of people who would come and go from the property during this 2-day search, right? Yes. And that's what Exhibit 147 is, if you would take a look at that. It appears to be a log that was being kept by one of your colleagues of everybody that came and went, right? Yes, okay. And do you see Detective Link's name? To make it easier for you, direct your attention to the bottom of the page. Lieutenant Link, I believe that, yes, I do. It shows Lieutenant Link arriving at 1810, right? That's correct. And there does not appear to be a similar log like this other one that's Exhibit 125 that's dated March 2nd. Have you seen one like this for March 1st? Yes, there is a, okay, log like this for March 1st. Okay, so maybe we just haven't found it. Exhibit 125 is a different kind of log. It's more specific to location on that property. Would that be fair? Yes. It specifically says garage and roped off area or something, right? Yes. And do you see Lieutenant Lenk's name on that? Yes. Do you actually remember him being there? I do. Do you remember him passing out food and drinks? Yes or no? No. He wouldn't do that. He's a lieutenant, right? He may have been passing out food or drinks. I just can't recall at this time. Okay. Do you know who asked Manitowoc County to rejoin this investigation on March 1st and 2nd? Attorney Kratz then says, objection, irrelevant, judge. Court says, Mr. Buting. Attorney Buting says, I think it's directly relevant. It's been a central part of this case. Attorney Kratz says, is there still a conflict on March 1st and 2nd? That's my objection, Your Honor. The court says, well, he can ask him if he knows. I will allow it. Do you know? Could you repeat the question? You may not know, that's fine, but I'm just asking if you know who asked. Well, let me ask you this. Who asked you to come and be the evidence custodian? Investigator Mark Wiegert. Okay. Do you know whether Mark Wiegert or Mr. Fassbender invited Manitowoc County back into this investigation so that they would be at the scene of this search of Mr. Avery's trailer and garage on March 1st and 2nd? Do I know that they asked Manitowoc County? Do you know who asked them? Do I know who specifically? No. Okay. But Mr. Wiegert and Mr. Fassbender, as far as you know, were the leaders of the investigation still at that time? That's correct. And Mr. Kratz asked if you noted Sergeant Colburn or Lieutenant Lenk in the garage area itself. You didn't, at that time, have any particular concern about the fairness or objectivity of either of those two officers, did you? No, I did not. As of March 1st and 2nd, you didn't know, or did you, that Lieutenant Lenk had been deposed as a witness in the Avery lawsuit? No, I did not know that at that time. So there was nothing about those two officers that would have put you on guard or to watch out to make sure they don't do something like plant evidence, right? That's correct. That's all I have of this witness. Thank you. The court says, Mr. Kratz, any redirect? Attorney Kratz says, not of this witness, Judge. The court then says, all right, very well. The witness is now excused. Mr. Kratz, you may call your next witness. In this episode, we finally moved past the juror drama and got back into the testimony. We heard from investigator Gary Steier of the Calumet County Sheriff's Department, who served as evidence custodian during the March 1st and 2nd search of Steven Avery's garage. Steier walked the jury through how 2 bullet fragments were found. There was one each day by DCI agent Kevin Heimerl. He also explained that he personally collected one and that Detective Remiker collected the other one and then turned it over to him. Both fragments were later submitted as evidence. Steier also testified that he never saw Lieutenant Lenk or Sergeant Colburn inside the garage during the search, and that if they had been there, he likely would have noticed. He emphasized that nothing unusual stood out to him. But when the defense got to him, they kind of poked around on some key concerns. So why was Manitowoc County previously sidelined, right, due to this conflict of interest, suddenly back on the scene 4 months later? Why were Lenk and Colburn anywhere near that garage, let alone logged in at the crime scene? And Steier, he says he wasn't even aware that Lenk was part of the civil suit that Avery had filed. And because of this, he wouldn't even be alert to any potential bias or misconduct. I mean, he wasn't actually watching them. So yeah, there's that. If you are hooked and want to hear this story play out in real time, directly from the courtroom as it happened, make sure you subscribe to the trial files. The link is waiting for you in the show notes. This case is far from over. In the next episode, we hear from Special Agent Kevin Heimerl. Again, he works for the Division of Criminal Investigation for the Wisconsin Department of Justice. He was involved in several searches of the Avery yard, including Steven Avery's trailer. He was involved in the examination of debris from the burn pit and present for the discovery of those bullet fragments. He is the final witness for day 9 of the trial. So be sure you come back to hear his testimony. Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate you so much for listening and want to welcome all the brand new subscribers. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be back soon with another episode. Until then, bye for now.